The drunk man goes through the bush on a cold night and ends up at a cemetery. He lies down on a gravestone, reflecting on his pitiful life in the village. He can't believe his eyes after a short while when he discovers the gravestones moving on their own. We then show a lone female being dropped off in the village by a truck, but the driver advises her not to walk into the mountains before leaving. Returning to the drunk, he informs the cops of what occurred at the graveyard. Although the authorities believe it is the work of vandals, the alcoholic claims to have seen individuals digging up graves and chanting the name Zhang. The inspector's attention is then drawn to an empty tomb in memory of a man named Zhang Zilan. As the inspector sees the name, he understands the situation is more serious than he believed. As he prepares to call the Zhang family's grandson, the girl appears, claiming the burial belongs to her grandfather. Inspector Song is suspicious of her identity, so she hands him her ID bearing the name Feng Bao Bao, who we later learn is our main protagonist. In the evening, we see another of our protagonists, Chulin, arrive in the village where he is greeted by an acquaintance who mocks him for not having any girls. Chulin is shocked when he learns that his grandfather's grave has been looted at the police station. The inspector adds that night he met a girl named Feng Bao Bao who claimed to be his stepsister. Chulin travels alone to his grandfather's tomb. He hears digging along the route and rushes to the place only to find a girl. He chooses to surreptitiously take a photo of her, but at that point she notices him, so he immediately runs away from the area. Just as Chulin believes he's fled, she catches up with him and knocks him down with a shovel. After some time, Chulin awakens to discover Bao Bao fighting a zombie. When he is in her way, she drags him into an empty grave to be buried. Chulin realizes this is the girl the inspector mentioned, so he attempts to be friendly with her. Bao Bao, on the other hand, reveals that the ID she used was a fake and begins burying him alive. He begs her to stop, and when she does, Chulin emerges from the grave to discover her fighting a swarm of zombies. He becomes terrified after witnessing her incredible talent and power, so he hides as she fights the zombies alone. During a battle, a zombie nearly kills Chulin, but she immediately saves him. Chulin feels he must be in a nightmare, so he starts yelling obnoxiously to get out. Both the zombies and Bao Bao are shocked by this ridiculous behavior. After Bao Bao becomes tired of fighting, she flees the area, and the zombies focus their attention to Chulin in large numbers. Bao Bao meets with a man and tells him what happened to Zhang Zilan's body. She also notifies him about Chulin's arrival, as well as the Jiangxi zombies. They see a lightning strike at the graveyard as he chides her for including a helpless boy in her mission. They race to the scene only to discover that the zombies had been burned to ashes. Chulin returns to college a few days later. He attempts to focus on what transpired in the community, but then, out of nowhere, Bao Bao appears beside him. Accompanied by Bao Bao, Chulin, whose real name is actually Chou Soran, is unable to focus, so he directly asks her what she wants from him. Outside, Soran threatens to denounce her to the police, but she is unfazed and goes on to tell him that she has a new fake ID, which he double-checks to ensure her genuine name is Fu Hao Hao. Soran, on the other hand, seems unconcerned and simply wants her to quit following him about. He reveals that she wishes to make Soran her servant, but first he must demonstrate the same power he used to fight the zombies. Soran decides to play dumb, so Hao Hao pulls out her concealed knife and charges at him. When he detects her bloodlust, he employs his ability to put distance between them. As she prepares to launch another attack, Hu is shocked by Soran's powers and potential. As he unleashes his technique, the air around him alters, causing Ho-Oh to become enraged and attack him. Her knife skills are simply overwhelming, but Soran defends himself with his speed and the Kinku method. As the struggle proceeds, he goes on the offensive, taking use of his tremendous speed. He succeeds in catching her off surprise. In other news, a villain group known as Sensei has acquired the body of famed martial artist Chou Soran. A youngster studies the corpse but is unable to find what he is searching for, so he informs the zombie user who delivered the corpse that she has another opportunity to help by capturing Soran next. Meanwhile, Ho-Oh overpowers Soran, revealing that she was just holding back because she wants him to become her servant. She threatens to publicize the fact that he has never made love to everyone in the school with a seal on his manhood if he refuses. In frustration, he caves in and swears fealty to her. Soran is depressed that his life is going apart at night, so he avoids his housemates. He becomes excited after they depart because he receives a friend request from a cute female. During their conversation, she confesses that she is a sophomore and invites him out on a date the next day. Howie tells him she'd like to introduce him to someone later. He then tells her he has something urgent to accomplish, but she pays no heed. Soran turns off the phone in the evening so he can continue with his date. As his date comes, he is relieved that she resembles her images. Ryu Kenkin then recommends taking her to a fancy restaurant, and thus their date begins. Hao Hao, on the other hand, is enraged that Soran turned off his phone. She instructs Jo-san to go to his position because his phone has a tracking device. It's well past curfew by the time Soran and Kenkin finish dining, so she recommends he sleep over at her flat, which he accepts. They are alone in her house, so Soran is noticeably nervous as she makes a move on him. Ryu, on the other hand, begins to use his gift, which allows him to read people's souls directly. Soran cries in misery because the procedure is extremely painful. Fortunately, Jo-san and Ho-Hao interrupt the process. Natsuki detects danger as they prepare to fight. Kenkin raises a swarm of zombies from the ground to begin the battle. Jo-san attacks with a rock, but Natsuki swiftly shatters it with her tremendous strength. Using her knives, Ho-Hao sprints at the opponents. She begins fighting Natsuki and the undead with skill. Jo-san saves Natsuki barely barely in time as she rushes towards her. Soran was quickly carried underground by an ally while they were distracted. Natsuki realized what was going on and used her strength to lift them above ground, but she wound up bashing them instead of grasping them. Chou Soran exposed his countless companions hidden all along after securing Soran. Once they finished up, everyone fled away. Chou Soran revealed that he's always had bad luck with girls when Soran observed he was down in the dumps. Instead of supporting Soran, he informs him that he is cursed with stupidity rather than poor luck, and that he has nothing appealing about him as a true man. Meanwhile, Chou Soran's comrades are still pursuing Ryu and Kenken. Kenken begs for rescue as she is about to fall off the automobile during the chase. She is, however, abandoned to die. The next day, Chou Soran drives Soran to her job at Express Delivery. Inside, he meets Chou Soran, who introduces himself properly. He tells Soran that everyone in the company is an outsider. Outsiders, he explains, are individuals with exceptional abilities and the ability to manipulate a special sort of energy known as Kai. Chou Soran enlightens Soran about the world of the outsiders as they walk into a prison. Inside, they meet Ryu Kenken, who was previously captured. Kenken says that she dislikes the Express Delivery guys because they are so high and mighty when she is chastised for attempting to join a group she knows nothing about. She is asked to divulge any knowledge she was managed to obtain while with Sensei in exchange for a milder penalty, but she refuses. She claims that she spent 15 years in isolation doing nothing but training with corpses. After she finished her training, they told her she couldn't use her skills in public. As a result, she opted to join Sensei, an organization that empowers her to do whatever she wants with her abilities. During their conversation, a man named Joe Yan appears and suggests that he use force on the girl to make her talk. He abuses her to the point where she is scared of him, but he is halted by Soran, who doesn't want him to lay more finger on her. Soran reminds Chou Soran that they don't have to go this far because he is the one who is affected by her actions. When Chou Soran hears this, he agrees, but Chou Yan does not, and everyone starts squabbling. Their demeanor prompts Kenken to confess that Sensei is after the legacy of two Shakurans. He had already confronted several Sensei members on his own and emerged unscathed. As a result, they were fascinated in his kid agent combat technique from that point forward. Tobuzi invites Soran to join their firm at the office, but he immediately declines. He confesses that he has a dream of becoming wealthy with little effort and enjoying a simple, carefree life, and that he has no desire to risk his life for a profession, no matter how good it pays. Toz then begins hitting Soran, forcing him to obey his master and sign up. Soran hears a disturbance outside late at night, but as soon as he opens the door, he is kidnapped by a bizarre doll. He emerges ready to strike after the doll transports him to its master, but a group of two females informs him that they are not from Sensei. They invite him to meet with the chairman of their organization, which makes Soran feel significant. Another group enters, Tenshifu, who requests that Soran accompany them to meet their master. This is because Sensei fostered the notion that he is the heir of the kid agent combat style, which is essentially the most ridiculous fighting technique ever. When Soran refuses to go with them, both parties begin fighting. As Soran activates his Kinku, it is discovered that his opponent is employing the same technique. He then confronts the two disciples, and after some back and forth, they retreat, having determined that his technique is related to their school. The captain, Ryoku, then enters and dismisses him. Soran is outraged and assaults him, but his Kinku defense is too powerful. Ryoku breaks through his defenses and knocks him out with a single blow. Soran rises to continue fighting, but his attacks are ineffective against his opponent. Thus, Ryoku uses his Kinku to squish him till he collapses. Despite Ryoku's warnings that he might end up handicapped, he still wants to fight. Before they continue, Vu emerges on the scene to motivate Soran by smacking him back to sanity. Soran then demonstrates another technique known as Rahu, which engulfs his body in lightning. As a result, when he attacks, his strength and speed substantially increase. As the conflict proceeds, the followers are astounded to see that Soran has mastered a devastating technique that only a few of their clan members are capable of. He utilizes this ability to corner Ryoku, but as he prepares to end the encounter, Ryoku counters his assault with a similar technique. In a battle of equivalent ability, he easily defeats Soran, but Hou intervenes to disperse his technique. Following the combat, Ryoku acknowledges Soran and invites him to their temple the next day for a tournament, who transports Soran to a villa where they would train together for a month. Inside, she approaches him and directs her force into him. Soran's body then begins to flood with his Kai. Hou discloses to him after he awakens that she has burned her technique into his head. As a result, he should start training right away. While he continues to train, he is distracted by a lovely Hou who appears in front of him. When Hou realizes that his seal is in the way, she invites him some women to help him fix the problem. Soran is offended by the way he is handled and decides to abruptly discontinue training. While Hou threatens him not to go, he stands on his choice and goes out on the road. He encounters Fushoin, who invites him to join her on her ride, which he agrees. When they arrive to the company, he is greeted by her father, who introduces him to Jay, Jiangju, another outsider. Fu Changhao later tells that a long time ago, a war erupted in the outsiders' culture, and that battle was fought over the acquisition of certain powers by 8 outsiders. Among the 8 mentioned powers were Chou Soran's kid agent style and his grandfather's channeling technique. The next day, Howie appears to the workplace dressed like a proper lady. She is refused entry at the reception desk, so some guards take her away. She falls down after breaking their limbs to escape since she isn't used to wearing heels. However, Soran explains that he is not interested in joining their gang since he feels guilty over abandoning Havu, who has been watching out for him all along. Meanwhile, Hu causes mayhem while searching for Soran. She then meets the organization's top outsiders. But as soon as she asks for Soran, she is ambushed by the first fighter, who fires air cannons at her. She, on the other hand, deftly avoids it and knocks him unconscious. Even when the groups attack her at the same time, she's unbeatable in the corridor. Soran gets into an altercation with Sean. The battle is one-sided because she easily defeats him with her teleportation abilities. When Hu reaches on the next floor, she discovers Jiangju waiting for her. He is able to keep up with Hu as they begin battling. After a successful evasion, Hu lands incorrectly, allowing Jiangju to unleash a hefty strike on her. He continues to dominate the fight with his Kai, which causes damage even when blocked. He then requests a timeout because she is dizzy from striking her head on the floor. She is still fighting the battle. This time, he employs a cover weapon against her. Although she dodges skillfully, she gets damaged since he can handle the weapon telekinetically. As the struggle progresses, she manages to avoid his punches while doing no damage herself, so she decides to take things seriously by taking off her heels. Meanwhile, Soran and Scene have continued their struggle, but this time he totally blocks all of her attacks. She lets him go since he won the bet. Hou and Zhongwu's struggle has changed dramatically once she let go of her heels. As the chairman arrives, Zhongwu understands that losing in front of him would be embarrassing, so he stops fighting. He informs Hou that if she begs him to let her live, he will. Instead, she has him kneel in front of her. As he becomes enraged and strikes her, she evades him and implants her heels into his skull firmly. He falls from the floor above just as she begins to approach the chairman for Soran. She apologizes to Soran and requests that he accompany her home. This surprised Soran as Hu is normally quite mean. He orders her not to move an inch no matter what, so he goes to inform the chairman that he wishes to resign. He is enraged and wants to strike Soran, but Soran does not back down. The chairman comes to a halt just before landing a punch, revealing that he was simply testing him. He lets him leave, but Zhang was enraged. He'd been embarrassed. He then attacks Hao, who does not move to avoid being hit. She is harmed as she remains steadfast in order not to break her pledge to Soran. As she begins losing a lot of blood intensely, Soran panics. The chairman then examines the situation and delegates authority to his son. His son employs a technique to seize control of the surgeon's soul and begins administering first aid to her. Soon after, Jo-san and Jo-young gain access to the building. They advise them to discontinue the treatment because they wish to care for her themselves. Goes informs Soran in the car that Hu is merely resting. When he realizes that the bleeding has stopped on its own, he becomes perplexed and seeks clarification elsewhere. Natsuko has taken control of 2 Tenshifu school members. The father and son begin to compete for her attention. She then invites them both to be her spies in the tournament. Soon thereafter, another sensei member appears, and they all proceed to a room where Ryu announces that he has successfully recovered Chou Soran's memories. He hands the item to Shuman, who examines it but finds nothing noteworthy. Ryu follows Soran into the woods the next day. When confronted, he begs not to fight, but rather to show his grandfather a glimpse of his grandfather's memories. He turns it over to Soran and tells him to do whatever he wants with the memory component. Soran is confused as soon as he notices the orb since the person he saw in his recollection was Hou, who looked just like she does now. He subsequently receives a call from Chose and goes to the hospital to discover a man whom they introduce as their father. More crucially, Soran asks Hou if she killed his grandfather, to which she confirms that she did. Soran explodes, but she calms him down by offering to explain everything. Her story begins in 1944, when 2 miners saw Hou alone in the wilderness. One of them attempted to exploit her, but happily, a couple arrived just in time to save her. They introduced her to Joshu, their kid, at home. She eventually moved in with them in the village. A few years later, bandits raided the village and held everyone hostage. When Hou came, she had no idea what was going on, and the men were interested in her. So Shu's father begged for her life. The cruel bandits murdered him, and when Shu charged at them, they knocked him down as well. Although Hou does not understand emotions, she is moved when she sees Shu's mother in tears. As Hu asks what she wants, she yells that she wants all the bandits killed. To fulfill her dream, Hu goes on a killing spree, finishing down all the bandits in the blink of an eye. Despite the fact that she has saved the villagers, they are terrified and push her away. Shu and his mother vow to join her as she set out to discover her family. But Shu's mother changes her mind and they abandon her in the woods. Shu is currently 56 years old after a few years. He becomes terrified when he discovers a photograph of Hou in the city. Hou has become a street homeless girl, thus she is easily duped by a woman who promises to take her in. Eventually, she is thrown in a cell to be sold, but the first purchasers who arrive are uninterested in her. All of that changes when one of them discovers she is the outsider Joshua has been looking for. Later, they take her to see Chose, who weeps over her condition. Hou is then hired by an express delivery delivery company. One day, they receive information about a meeting of certain clan heads, so he drags Ho-Ho there, thinking someone would recognize her. As they arrive at the spot, however, they discover that everyone has died. As they proceed, they see the final man standing being defeated by Chou Soran. When he sees Hao, he remembers her immediately. Nevertheless, he doesn't have enough time to explain her past to her. Instead, he begs her to protect his grandson since it is the only way he can learn more about her. Before he dies, he asks how to terminate his life himself. He then teaches her his skill so she can teach it to Soran when the time comes. As soon as his injury begins to worsen, Ho puts an end to his suffering. Back in the present, Soran is having difficulty processing all of the information. As a result, Chou vows to teach him more about his father, who was formerly a prominent member of the Tenshifu clan alongside their present lord. He encourages Soran to compete in the Reiten Teishu competition so that he can meet the current Tenshifu leader. After that, Chou's life comes to a calm end, and the anime concludes. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you loved the video, and turn on the notification bell to never miss another one. Until next time, take care.